Guys, I just figured out who the Bracken is. I've crunched the numbers, run the facts, and the answer is so obvious it's laughable no one has discovered it before. After studying all the data, I have come to the realization that the Bracken is in fact Flowey, but grown up. Let me explain. First point of consideration is the Bracken itself. There are many enemies in Lethal Company. Most are animals, some are ghosts. But there is only one plant-based enemy, the Bracken. It's rather odd that of all the enemies, only the Bracken is a plant. A very angry plant, that is. Next, let's take a look at what happens when the Bracken dies. In Undertale, when a monster dies, its body dissolves into dust. This can be seen when defeating any enemy in Undertale. Now let's examine the Bracken. When it dies, its body dissolves into dust. The enemy log even states as much. Quite the coincidence, if I do say so myself. Next, let's take a look at coil heads, oddly enough. According to Undertale Lore, the story of that game starts off with a big battle between monsters and humans. Humans eventually win and drive the monsters underground. Now for this war, one could easily assume that both sides would use any means necessary to win, perhaps even including creating biologically based weapons. Now let's take a look at the Coilhead's Beastiary Log. Interesting. It mentions that people theorize that Coilheads were created as weapons of war. A war to defeat monsters, perhaps? Next, let's look at the Bracken spawning. On every map, certain enemies have a chance to spawn. You could end up with a couple Coilheads, a few hoarding bugs, a ghost girl, or even a jester. Oddly though, you can ever only have one Bracken. One ghost girl makes sense, as it's a ghost. But only one Bracken? Only one Bracken would make sense because there was only ever one Flowey. However, let's examine the multiple sightings of the Bracken. According to its bestiary again, the computer tells us that scientists have tried to study it, but it decomposes too quickly, something I mentioned earlier. However, we run across the Bracken on multiple moons. So how can there be only one if we see multiple of them? The answer to that is very simple. Flowey, according to Undertale, has the ability to time travel. In the Undertale universe, whenever your player character is killed, you suddenly wake back up at the last place you saved your game. At the end of Undertale, you learn that Flowey also has this ability, and whenever he dies, he revives as well sometime earlier. So therefore, it wouldn't be hard to imagine multiple Bracken sightings, even if there were only ever one Bracken, because that one Flowey Bracken would be able to rewind time whenever he wanted. That's just my theory.